Welcome to Rauta's Top Picks for year 2024. It's once again this time of the year, the early 2025, when I'm going to mention my honorary picks or my top 10, whatever you take it, for you, dear audience. And the reason why I do this always in early January, as opposed to say late November or mid-December like some people do, is that I always want to wait for the year to end. And why so? Call it autism or call it just being very strict with this. I want to do it because sometimes the end of the year really surprises. And when people, finalize their lists with, say late November already, they're missing a whole month of given albums. And as such, it means they're more like picking their favorite albums of past 11 months as opposed to full year. So for me, it's very important that the year is actually finished. And only around the end of the year, I will start listening to those, say, competitors or the possible picks for a given year. And it's only after the year has finally ended, because I'm very much waiting for the year to end before doing the list. Only then the finalizing results are being, selected and, chosen. And that's when I really just do my list. So this time I'm really proud of being strict with that, because not only one, but more like 4 possible contenders appeared in my radar in December. Some of them came early December. They're like few albums that actually came through, say, Soul Cellar Records on December 6th to just, challenge whatever was going on throughout the year. Then there was other one in like mid-December to like, hey, this is one of the better contenders of the given year. So, in my opinion, it was like a big, middle finger, not question mark, I was about to say, middle finger to those people, like those who hurry up too much, they're gonna miss these bands. And it's shame for the bands and labels and artists, obviously, but also, in my opinion, kind of puts a little bit shame on these people who are so hasty creating their lists that they're gonna miss some of the key albums and bands for that matter. Anyhow, here it is. And first, before I start listing these bands, I want to say one thing. The order itself is not exactly strict, and this is for various reasons. But the main reason is, of course, that sometimes a certain album just sounds a little bit better than the other one, while they might be totally equal. I would actually go as far as to say the number one is clearly, in my opinion, the best of the given year, but the rest from positions from like 2 to 10 are more or less like kind of equal, and it really could change over the years in how I would rate them. So don't take this list too strictly, like, hey, number 7 is clearly better than number 9, because it's not like that. But roughly, say maybe top 3 is a little bit better than the bottom 3 or whatever. But apart from that, don't really pay too much attention if your favorite album is on the spot number 6 versus spot number 3, because honestly, it doesn't matter that much. So here we go. I put in them already on this secondary window as my browser, so just we can choose a little bit. Now, obviously, if you open the description box for this video before seeing this video, you will see that there are way more than top 10 albums, and that's because these are contenders. Basically, any of these 20 plus albums are the ones that could have been ending in top 10, but because eventually you really have to pick only top 10, now here they are. We'll start with Nile, which I never got a physical copy, and as such I was really figuring out if I'm gonna even include it. It's not like they have to be reviewed by me in order to get on my list, but let's be honest about it. I listened way more to albums that I got for review, because I really have to put more time and focus on them rather than something that's just passing by on the stream or whatever. So I was expecting Nile's latest album, The Underworld, awaits us all already in August to appear, and it was supposed to be sent to me, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna wait, and suddenly it was like October, at least September, didn't came, and I was like, okay, whatever, so maybe I will listen to it eventually. I was already like ready to put it in the year 2025 and figure it out later, but then I found a little bit of time to give it a go and another go, and I was like, okay, now I'm gonna actually have to put it here, because Nile is one of my all-time death metal favorites, and as such I couldn't really wait any longer. I kind of wanted to know if it's that good it would end up on my list or not, and yeah, it would. So here it is, position number 10, Nile the Underworld awaits us. This is almost, closer to 60 minutes with all that stuff, and apart from that, it's very, very basic Nile in good and bad. In bad, I mean, it's not really fundamentally changing anything here. Once you start with the first song or two, you pretty much know how the ride is going to be all the way through. So it's technical, yeah, it's atmospheric at parts, and obviously it's the kind of a Nile album they have been doing for, almost 30 years by now. So it's always like very good produced, songwriting is great with details and all. And at the same time, they maintain the brutality, which is not so much given when you're doing technical and atmospheric death metal. Now, obviously, there are some bands which are roughly in the same box, but there are not too many. So, in my opinion, Nile is like almost like one of a kind. And it is indeed one of a kind when you combine this with the Egyptian themes and all. So, not so surprisingly, it ended up on my list, but in a very, very last minute, really. Only maybe 2 days before I was like, okay, the list is now done and locked and all, and I'm gonna now do a video. Now, for the record, this is January 4th when I'm doing this, so already been locked for a few days. But yeah, Nile really didn't take anything surprising, so maybe because of that, it made on my list. And now I have to really check it out what I had put here, because it's not like I remember all of these like that. But yeah, let's move on. Maybe next one I would pick, Satanic Warmaster's latest album, which was one of those December album, Exaltation of Cruelty. This came December 13th, so only 2 weeks before the end of the year, and as such, I'm sure a lot of people missed it. The CD version, for example, which I got with the two CD version, but the second version is just, basically the raw version of the first album, so it's not like a real double album, so we're gonna focus on the first one. This is something that I reviewed already, so I'm not gonna go that much into detail with that. Everything is said on the video. But this is, with its 55 minutes, which is quite a lengthy one for a raw black metal album, this is Judas Iscariot Homage. It's like a tribute or worship album. People use these words sometimes synonymously with one another, but indeed it is. It's like a big step from, previous albums by Satanic Warmaster, and some people were like shocked because it's not so melodic, not so polished anymore, not so clean in a way. But for me, because I consider Judas Iscariot as one of the best, like top 3, top 2 maybe, black metal bands from USA all times, and because this is so much doing that stuff, even to a length that this raw version has the old Judas Iscariot drummer in it, so it's like perfect worship in that sense. But like I said, I get it. Not everybody's gonna like it because it's just so different from previous Satanic Warmaster albums. But for me, if somebody it makes a perfect copy of a great band, like in this case Judas Iscariot, I'm like, why would I bitch about it? For me, it's like a really, really great thing, because indeed it's just how to say. When I love something, I don't mind if it's being copied, because then I get more of what I love, really. There are cheap copies, which are not that good, obviously, but when you get things like this, like really a worship, homage, tribute, yeah, it's different. So, for me, this totally deserves its spot on my top 10 list. Then it gets trickier, because there are lots of black metal albums which in my books were really, really equal, but I guess I would pick Seer Bliss for Hungary, already another band with more than 30 years in history, and their new album, Heavenly Down, totally surprised me. Now, this is separated from the rest of the albums on this list because of its really beautiful one. It's really soothing, it's atmospheric, and to a borderline of being kind of a folky pagan thing. But by folk, I don't mean it's gonna be goofy and dancing and weird instruments so much. It's more about how the album, carries its atmosphere, the feeling, the emotions that this album has is vastly different than those which are more hateful, resentful, violent, inhuman and all. Like, for example, if, say, Satan the Warmaster is more coming from the caverns and, bringing out the trolls and orcs and, or undead beings for the comparison. This is more about the fairies and pixies and beautiful things. Like, it's like taking this beautiful trip to a paradise of sorts, or maybe a forest walk. And while you could argue that this is not really my cup of tea, I would say, yeah, it is not. But suddenly, when all the right buttons are being pushed, I'm like, sign me up for that. This is a beautiful trip, which I went many, many times. And I am still kind of astonished how this old band managed to make maybe their best album so far. One of the best. And I haven't heard them all, mind you. There are some parts which I managed to avoid for some reason over the years. But Syrbillis has always been, a little bit different than most bands in the stuff. And even though nowadays a lot of people would say these kind of bands are more like post-black or atmospheric black metal and all that stuff. I don't know even how this is. Yeah, atmospheric black metal, here Metal Archives. There are lots of bands which are more like, okay, let's do cheap-ass Burzum copies. And their atmospheric kind of comes and ends with that. But, Heavenly Down is just so much more than that. It's in fact, it doesn't really, remind me of Burzum at all. And can't say that for, bad reason. Great album, beautiful one, and totally deserves their spot in my top 10 list. So, number 8. Then it gets harder for me because there are lots of albums which are really, very close to one another. So, if that was the bottom 3 on my top 10 list, I guess Serpent's Out from Belgium with their third album really surprised me. Now, their previous albums, Nihil and Ascension, were pretty decent albums, no doubt about that, but they were not great. They were more like, preparing for, you for what's to come. And Revelation, which already came out in the spring, I was like, wow, what the hell is this? Suddenly, I knew the band before, obviously, for a couple of albums which I have reviewed. But Revelation is like a newborn band of this previous past. And this is, at the same time, very traditional black metal, the second wave, traditions. So everything you kind of hear is like familiar. You can probably figure out, okay, this reminds me of this band and this reminds me of that band. So it's not like the rawest out there, and it's definitely not one of those atmospheric or symphonic black metal, but it pushes all the right buttons. And as such, it's so good, it's able to challenge a lot of those classics from the 90s and just, do it better. It's almost like this new contender entering the, martial arts cage and kicking ass of lots of old veterans, throwing them out and showing, hey, we are the new kings. We are the ones that can challenge you and do it better because we have the songwriting, we have the productions, we have the vocals, we have the mood, the atmosphere, everything here. So while it's not the most violent, black metal album out there ever, there are lots of, that good aggression binding together with the blackness and kind of evil sounding and all that stuff. So sure, some people might say, yeah, but it's basic stuff. You've heard it a million times. And yeah, but I've also heard a million times more boring than this. This is, in my opinion, great album. It's not really catchy, with one certain songs and all that stuff. But I mean, overall, this is so strong an album, which reminds me another one, which I'm going to soon mention. And maybe because it kind of takes me back, but without any kind of nostalgia, because this wasn't there out there in back in, say, 97 or whatever. So it's almost like doing the magical trick, which you really didn't think it's that possible. Putting you back in your own timeline and, all that stuff while still being fresh. And in my opinion, it's got to be worth something, quite a lot. So in my opinion, Revelation is definitely one of the best albums in year 2024, and as such ends up top 6. Then another album which is very close to that in so many ways, but also are different, is Horna Rive's new album, Den Vrede Makt. This is another band that has been, in my radar for quite some time, now 20 years plus in the making, and 4 albums out. And I think this really nailed, made their probably the best so far. This is another album that came, in the spring, late spring, however. And I've seen Hordom Rife live like 3 times, always like really strong and all. And their albums have been, good all the way through. But now something maybe is on a new level. Pretty much like Serpent's Oath, this is not exactly bringing much new ideas to the table. This is more like, let's do second wave black metal that was supposed to be. Now with stronger production and, lots of variety while still maintaining true and without no weird gimmickry or ideas that doesn't really belong to, the second wave of black metal. So kind of a very, very traditional in so many ways, much like Serpent's Oath. And like I said, these positions could be interchangeable. Really hard to, separate 2 great ones from one another. But this is how it is. And as such, in this is top 6 now, not top 5. So here we are with this album that, even when I was giving it another go after the spring when I was listening to this for review, it was like, once again, like, wow, man, these guys are so good. And the angry vocals with the good production, really key in songwriting, and enough variety, just, do more than one trick pony, makes this 50-minute trip, really a strong one. So, like I said, one of the best black metal albums of year 2025. So, as you can see, this is already like very, very loaded with black metal. I was honestly expecting a little bit death metal and a little bit maybe thrash metal in my top list, but so far it seems like there's one death metal album and everybody else is just doing black metal. And what the hell, now we have 5 more albums, and what you have here is Inquisition for United States. And this is another band that I've liked for a long time. I wasn't really a fan with their really early stuff, 1998, 2002, when they were figuring out their own style. I mean, they had already been out there for like a decade, but the early albums didn't do that much more for me. I remember seeing them, I think it was early 2000s in my home city. I remember them be like, yeah, okay, but the vocals were not too good, and the songwriting, while it was kind of decent and all, yeah, wouldn't be my cup of tea really that much. However, over the years, things started to change, and especially when we came around this era, I'm not going to say it's exactly like that, but the new decade, new millennium and new decades came to be, and suddenly the whole band was, kind of leveling up, making stronger albums and, making the overall better and more varied. And I was like, man, this is really, really doing the stuff here. Like some of these albums, like Bloodshed Across, whatever, is one of the best ones. This is, in my opinion, one of the eras where it really bloomed. Now, Black Mass for a Mass Grave was a good album, but not as good as some of the previous works. So I was expecting something similar here. Now, in my opinion, Veneration of medieval mysticism and cosmological violence is a step up from that. Not maybe their best, but very close to it, because this kind of a massive piece if you really think of it, 13 songs, which means shorter and more focus, which is great. Is an album that is kind of a curious because it is kind of a different and kind of a very traditional Inquisition album. In that sense, much like I was talking about Nile one. So here they are doing a lot of traditional Nile kind of riffing. And this is kind of a trademark thing of them. I don't think there are other bands which really sound like Nile. Surely you could say certain Nile parts sound like a little bit of Immortal here and there. But the whole result is also quite different. And in my opinion, Nile and Immortal are quite different, even though I find the similarities there. But what is also curious is that they almost like have these surf rock moments. They're kind of weird, like how on earth they are going to use these ideas, and somehow they make it work magically. And one of these elements are the reason, or some of these ideas are the reasons why I like this album so much, because it's brave enough to step out of the comfort zone, come out of its silo or bunker or whatever, and step outside there and, challenge itself with some new ideas, while maintaining the core of Inquisition intact. And as such, it's a wonderful album, and was not so surprised to see it, for example, when Northern Heritage's record store site, Sarvilevyt by Mikko Aspa, listed this in top 5, because while it's not your typical black metal album in so many ways, for example, with Serpent's Oath or Whoredom Rife or maybe Satanic Warmaster 2. Still there are lots of things which are the very, very typical second wave things, and then more. And because of this more, I find this really, really a great album to listen to. I like it when you can put some nice ideas and still keep it true and honest and not losing your integrity. So great album, which it's why it's in my top 5. And then it gets trickier. True Black Dawn goes into my top 5 for similar reasons as I mentioned for Inquisition. Enough variety, atmospheric parts, but also kind of keeping the black flame burning, evil, dark, and all that stuff. At the same time, you could say, yes, it has more similarities with the Serpent's Oath and all, being very traditional 1990s inspired album. Some melodic parts, some atmospheric parts, some that are more eerie, evil, dark, and all. But maybe it's because of this combination. This is, in my opinion, a little bit catchier than Inquisition and a little bit more evil and dark than that, which I maybe would put it in a little bit higher position. But like I said, these are mostly interchangeable. But a lot of these albums, which I mentioned already in my top 10, seem to share some common ideas why they are so important to me. It's the certain kind of evil and darkness and the atmosphere combined with certain level of violence and danger and mysticism and all, which then again make these albums so important. Now, people who don't understand my music taste, this is very good to talk about, is like with black metal, it's always being about darkness and the haunting atmospheres and evil. Some would say it's just Satan or the devil, and it's fine. They can really, include all the ideas what I'm talking about. But when you go out of that, darkness and evil sounding, the sinister mood, it doesn't really talk to me the same way. And that's the problem with a lot of atmospheric black metal bands. They start to do something which is more beautiful. I don't want beautiful music when I'm listening to extreme metal. And as such, when I find bands such as True Black Dawn, something that I've been listening to since their first album back in the days, more than 20 years ago, this has always been the evil sounding, the sinister mood albums, and all their albums are great. In my opinion, this is, however, probably their best so far. But all the albums are really good and worth owning, if you ask me. So come as no surprise knowing the main songwriter for the band, that he's really good at what he does. And luckily, this is not his only band, so Siphon, who is taking care of a lot of the musical ideas here, has done some fantastic work with Baptism, for instance. So as such, didn't really surprise me at all that they would do one of the best albums. This has been already out for quite some time, as you can see. Came out in late July, so it was a summer album. The kind of a summer album which would make the whole summer really dark and sinister and, grim. Great album overall, and that's why it is in my top 4. And the reason why Terrestrial Hospice EP is in top 3 is because it's more fierce, it's more violent, it's more hostile than any of the albums I mentioned. Sure, the intensity for this position and the challenge, why I picked this one was fierce. I mean, basically, this could take the rawness from Satanic Warmaster, combine it with, Serpent's Oath and True Black Dawn's kind of a vile, sinister thing, but this was more like violent. It's almost like you have these two guys meeting one another and the stronger wins. Terrestrial Hospice here is the stronger guy. Now, I became a big fan of the band with already the debut album 4 years ago, Indian Summer brought Mushroom Clouds. And I didn't even check out the background back then. I later, these guys have history with a lot of interesting bands. You can pretty much see it here. But like I said, all these are in the reviews. So I'm not going to, recover them or recap them at this point. Career to the General, 3 years later, was a great successor to the first album. And kind of a solidified, like, this is not one trick pony who just got lucky with the debut album. They really know what they're doing. Now, Rubesal, which the name takes, is from mythologies from Central Europe, is basically some songs or ideas which were left from the previous session. So that's why it's so kind of consistent with the previous style and so came so quickly. Only 21 minutes through 4 songs. These really continue the legacy of Terrestrial Hospice, but also there are more atmospheric parts which just create a nice twist to it. Remember when I said Inquisition is so great because it had more than just one common theme, or same goes for True Black Dawn. Exactly the same is Terrestrial Hospice. This wins by an inch because it's even more fierce and violent, more dangerous, if you will. And then we go top 2. Not surprisingly, but still kind of unexpected, is that Gaerea ended up in top 2, or position number 2, now you can figure it out. Now, another band I became a fan already with the first release 2020, Under His Way EP, which was like a homage to old Rotting Christ by some veterans of the Greek black metal scene. I mean, this was like going back to early mid-90s and such, wow. Now, when the debut album As the Flame Withers came a year later, it already won me over, but I liked Under His Way even more. So, good album, or great album was there, and I was like, okay, this is really, really great stuff. I'm gonna, like this in the future as well. And when I got to see them live, it was really like fucking great. It was great to meet these guys, do interview and all. And obviously, I was waiting for new material to come at some point, but it came sooner maybe than later, with 3 years difference. And from the get-go, the first tracks and all, Blazing Inferno was like, wow, this is the magical Greek feeling which seems only to appear in Greek releases. And while this is not my typical album to like in a way, because it's so atmospheric and so soothing, so beautiful, but it's also kind of a dark, even it's not violent like the Whoredom Rife or Serpent's Oath or Terrestrial Hospice or the grimness and rawness of Satanic Warmaster. Basically, I am supposed to like them more. But this just, won me over because, I don't know, it's just about the whole package. And the atmosphere here is the kind of not divine, it's almost like evil divine kind of a thing. So at the same time, it's the otherworldly thing with the atmosphere and all. It's not about like, oh, let's go for a nature walk. This is something like, let's get ready to enter a new world, a new dimension, a new plane of existence, with this, magnificent, feeling. It's like these immortal creatures are talking to us once again. So it's like unearthly experience in a way. And yes, I really fucking love this album. And basically all the Gaerea stuff is like very high on my list, and as such, this is the metal album of the year for me. And like I said, it wasn't come so surprised because in year 2020, Under His Way EP was my EP of the year, well, release of the year in my list. So this is a second timer in my top 10 list, or I don't know, maybe As the Flame Withers were right there, but as winning, for metal position here in the list. Yeah, good job by Gaerea, a great band. Which puts us into number 1 on the list, and it's not metal at all. It's one of my favorite dark ambient acts, Lustmord, which has been here for decades, since the 80s. And I was expecting some level of goodness, obviously. That's why I requested this album with a beautiful cover, by the way. This is really like captivating, already mesmerizing, the art and all. And this level of dark ambience is just like, wow. It's extraordinary. It's like beyond your typical great albums and all. And there was no doubt throughout the years that this would be very high on the list. I was kind of surprised that no metal album was able to really challenge this one. So it basically was, ever since it came to the existence and arrived here, it really kind of it didn't surprise me that there were no albums which were as good as this one. It maintained the number 1 positions throughout the year. I mean, and yeah, it's a really fantastic album. And what can I say? It's fantastic that sometimes your favorite albums aren't really metal, but something else. It's the darkest albums of the whole year I listened to, and it's still, just wonderful experience overall. So as you can see, all my top 10 picks for this year are quite different, and yet at the same time quite similar in fashion, like how they are in terms of my taste. I mean, if you know my taste earlier, you're like, okay, nothing surprising there. But as you can see in the description box, there are way more than just this top 10. This is more like half of my favorite albums. I don't remember the actual count for December, but something like 22 are included in my favorite albums for year 2024. So even if I now go through top 10 ones, check out the other ones too. They are all great albums, and it's so dominated by black metal that I was almost laughing to myself why it is like that. But it is what it is, and now you know my picks. Feel free to disagree, that's part of the whole thing here. But some suggestions come from me to you to check out these wonderful albums, and you shouldn't be shy on spending your money on these. Now you go past Christmas, you got your Christmas money or Yule money, whatever you're celebrating, and you can start spending again. So create some new albums from year 2024, because you probably missed some of these, and go enjoy, and then prepare for the festival season to witness some of these bands live. At least that's my plan anyway. Now, if you have some suggestions which I might have missed or which I didn't mention, just let me know. Probably I have heard some of them and I just won't agree with it so much, but probably I missed a lot of great albums. Happens every year. So let me know which are your favorites. Keep suggesting and maybe I will revisit them later on. At least that's the plan of doing a missed gems of 2024 video later on this year when I have heard enough and more of albums of 2024, even though they didn't make this list. So keep them coming and let me know what are your favorites. Off you go. Cheers.